Do you think you know Australia? Think again. While Sydney and Melbourne shine as jewels of modern civilization, there's a shocking truth that most people completely ignore. Northern Australia, a region larger than all of Western Europe, remains practically empty, without a single truly important city. And no, it's not just a geographical coincidence or a casual choice by urban planners. Behind this apparent failure in Australian development lies one of the most fascinating and revealing geographical curiosities of our planet, a story that goes far beyond what you imagine and that can completely change your perspective on how civilizations actually develop. Prepare to discover why nature is sometimes more powerful than all human plans combined, and how this disadvantage might actually be the secret of Australian success that nobody wants to admit. Imagine trying to build a city where the thermometer reads 45 degrees Celsius in the shade for consecutive months, and you'll begin to understand one of Australia's main geographical curiosities. Northern Australia is a true natural laboratory of climatic extremes, where scorching heat combines with humidity that would make even an experienced Gold Coast surfer think twice before venturing out. During the dry season, from May to October, temperatures can easily exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while in the wet season, from November to April, torrential rains transform vast areas into temporary oceans. These climatic conditions aren't just uncomfortable, they represent monumental challenges for any significant urban development attempt. Australian geography has reserved for its northern region a climate that tests the limits of human endurance and modern engineering. The curiosities about these extreme conditions go far beyond what numbers can express. During peak summer months, nighttime temperatures rarely drop below 30 degrees Celsius, creating an endless cycle of heat that profoundly affects quality of life and human productivity. Air conditioning systems work 24 hours a day, consuming astronomical amounts of electrical energy. Imagine an electricity bill equivalent to an entire family's monthly budget just to keep indoor temperatures bearable. The tropical storms and cyclones that ravage the region during the wet season can destroy entire infrastructures within hours, as happened with Cyclone Tracy in Darwin in 1974, which practically wiped the city off the map. Nature itself seems to conspire against establishing large urban centers in this region, creating an environment where surviving is already an achievement, let alone thriving. But here's a fascinating perspective that few consider: these extreme climatic conditions aren't just obstacles, they're also relentless teachers of adaptation and innovation. The small communities that manage to thrive in Northern Australia have developed construction techniques and lifestyles unique in the world, using natural materials like bamboo and passive ventilation techniques that trace back to millennial Aboriginal traditions. Darwin, for example, had to be completely rebuilt after the cyclone, and today serves as a global model for disaster-resistant architecture. The geographical curiosities of this region teach us that sometimes the greatest challenges can transform into the most valuable learning opportunities. And this leads us to an even more intriguing question: if the climate is so challenging, how do people get enough water to survive in these conditions? Water, this resource we consider as basic as the air we breathe, becomes a precious luxury in the vast expanses of Northern Australia. One of the most impressive curiosities about this region is that, despite receiving torrential rains during some months of the year, most of this water simply disappears, either evaporating under the relentless sun or quickly draining through soils that cannot adequately retain it. During the dry season, which extends for more than half the year, finding reliable sources of fresh water becomes a challenge that would make any hydraulic engineer lose sleep. Australian geography has created a cruel paradox: a region that can be flooded in January can be completely dry in July, forcing any urban development attempt to face this unpredictable and extreme cycle. The geographical curiosities of this area reveal that nature is sometimes more generous in theory than in practice. To understand the magnitude of this challenge, consider that a city of 100,000 inhabitants, a modest size by modern urban standards, needs approximately 40 million liters of water per day just for basic needs like consumption, hygiene, and sanitation. In Northern Australia, This amount of water would need to be stored during the few rainy months to sustain the population during the long dry periods. Imagine building reservoirs the size of several football fields, with purification systems capable of processing water with high levels of sediments and natural contaminants. The small towns that exist in the region, like Catherine or Tennant Creek, depend on deep underground aquifers or costly desalination systems that consume enormous amounts of energy. Each drop of water represents not only a vital resource but also a significant financial investment that makes any large-scale project economically challenging. But here's a perspective few dare to consider. Water scarcity in northern Australia is forcing the development of some of the most advanced water conservation technologies on the planet. Companies like Seqwater and Sydney Water are testing revolutionary water recycling systems that transform even wastewater into drinking water of superior quality to many natural sources. The Aboriginal communities of the region have developed over millennia water location and conservation techniques that today inspire modern engineers. They can find water in locations that would seem completely arid to inexperienced eyes. The curiosities about human adaptation in this region show that extreme limitations can generate extraordinary innovations. And this makes us think, if getting water is already so complicated, imagine trying to connect a large city in this region with the rest of the world? Have you ever imagined living in a place where the nearest city is more than 1,500 kilometers away? This is one of the most impressive curiosities about Australia's geography. The north of the country is one of the most isolated regions on the planet, where distances are measured not in kilometers, but in days of travel. To get a real sense of this vastness, consider that from Darwin to Adelaide is more than 3,000 kilometers, a distance equivalent to traveling from Lisbon to Moscow. This geographical isolation isn't just a matter of numbers on the map. It represents logistical challenges that would make any experienced businessman rethink their expansion plans. The geographical curiosities of this region reveal that sometimes geography can be the greatest obstacle to human development, creating natural barriers that no modern technology can completely eliminate. The cost of transporting anything to northern Australia is simply astronomical, and this affects everything from a simple package of cookies to complex industrial equipment. Imagine paying double or triple the price for basic products like food, medicine, or construction materials. This is the daily reality for those living in these remote regions. A container of goods that costs $2,000 to transport between Sydney and Melbourne can cost more than $8,000 to reach a city in the Northern Territory interior. Logistics companies like Toll Holdings and Linfox need to use complex combinations of road, rail, and air transport, often taking weeks to deliver products that in other parts of the world arrive in days. To establish a large city, it would be necessary to create a logistics network from scratch, with costs that would make even large multinational corporations hesitate before investing. But here's a fascinating perspective that transforms this apparent problem into opportunity. The isolation of northern Australia is creating communities with a level of self-sufficiency and innovation rarely seen in other parts of the developed world. Cities like Broome and Alice Springs have developed extremely creative local economies, where every resource is maximized and every opportunity is exploited. Residents have learned to fix, reuse, and adapt practically everything, creating a culture of practical sustainability that many modern metropolises could learn from. The curiosities about human adaptation show that when you can't depend on external suppliers, people discover talents and skills they didn't even know they possessed. And this makes us question, could it be that the lack of external connections also means a lack of valuable natural resources that would justify all this effort? When we talk about urban development, there's an inconvenient truth that many prefer to ignore. Large cities don't appear by chance, they are born where there's gold, oil, diamonds, or some other resource that makes investors' eyes shine. One of the most revealing curiosities about Australian geography is that the north of the country, despite its impressive vastness, simply doesn't possess strategic economic resources in sufficient quantities to justify the massive investment necessary to build a metropolis. While the south and west of Australia are blessed with gold, iron, and coal mines that move billions of dollars annually, the North remains relatively poor in high commercial value mineral resources. Geographical curiosities teach us that nature can be generous in beauty and challenging in climate, but this doesn't necessarily translate into economic wealth. It's like having an immense plot of land, but without discovering that there are diamonds buried in the neighbor's backyard. To understand the magnitude of this difference, consider that the Pilbara region in Western Australia produces more than 300 million tons of iron ore per year, generating revenues exceeding $50 billion annually for giants like BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto. In contrast, the tropical North depends mainly on seasonal tourism, fishing, and subsistence agriculture, sectors that, while important, simply don't generate the volume of capital necessary to sustain large urban centers. The absence of a solid economic anchor means there's no convincing reason for large corporations to invest billions in basic infrastructure like ports, international airports, universities, and specialized hospitals. It's like trying to convince someone to build a shopping mall in a location where there's no guarantee there will be enough customers to pay the store rents. The curiosities about economic development show that urban dreams need solid financial foundations. But here's a perspective that few economists dare to consider. The apparent poverty of traditional resources in Northern Australia may be hiding future economic opportunities that we haven't yet learned to value adequately. The region has vast solar energy reserves. Imagine solar panels that could generate enough electricity to supply not only Australia but export clean energy to neighboring countries through submarine cables. Companies like Tesla and Neoen are already experimenting with large-scale energy storage projects that could transform the North into a renewable energy powerhouse. The region's unique biodiversity also represents an unexplored pharmaceutical treasure. Plants and organisms that evolved under extreme conditions often develop unique chemical compounds that can revolutionize modern medicine. Geographical curiosities remind us that a region's economic value can change completely when humanity develops new technologies and needs. And this makes us think, perhaps the problem isn't the lack of resources, but the fact that people simply chose to live elsewhere a long time ago? History has a peculiar way of shaping the present, and one of the most fascinating curiosities about Australian geography is how decisions made over 200 years ago still determine where millions of people live today. When the first British settlers arrived in Australia in 1788, they naturally chose to settle in the southeastern coastal regions, where the climate was milder and reminiscent of their homeland. Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide didn't become large cities by accident. They were the first entry points and, as often happens in human history, the first to arrive got the best places. This initial concentration created a domino effect that persists today. Where there are people, commerce emerges. Where there's commerce, opportunities arise. Where there are opportunities, more people move. Geographical curiosities show us that sometimes timing is more important than perfect location, and Southern Australia simply had a 2-century head start in development. To understand the magnitude of this historical concentration, consider that today more than 80% of Australia's population lives in a strip of just 200 kilometers along the southeast coast. Cities like Sydney house more than 5 million inhabitants, while the entire Northern Territory, an area larger than France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined, has only 250,000 people. This population concentration created a self-perpetuating cycle. Prestigious universities like the University of Sydney and University of Melbourne attract the best talents. Specialized hospitals like Royal Melbourne Hospital concentrate the best doctors. Multinational companies establish their headquarters where qualified workforce is available. It's like a snowball that has been rolling for 2 centuries, growing exponentially and making it increasingly difficult for other regions to compete. The curiosities about urban development reveal that historical momentum can be more valuable than natural geographical advantages. But here's a revolutionary perspective that few historians dare to share. This concentration in the south may have been the smartest decision Australia ever made, even if it was unconscious. Imagine if the country's limited resources had been spread uniformly across the entire continent. We would probably have dozens of medium cities instead of some truly competitive metropolises on the world stage. Melbourne competes directly with London and New York as a financial center, Sydney rivals Los Angeles as an entertainment and media hub, Adelaide has become a center of excellence in medical research and viticulture. This concentration allowed Australia to develop cities with sufficient critical mass to attract international investments and global talents. Geographical curiosities teach us that sometimes having fewer options can lead to better results, especially when combined with focus and specialization. And this makes us question, would it be economically viable to try to break this historical pattern and develop the North, considering the costs involved? Building a city from scratch is like trying to solve a million-piece puzzle, where each piece costs a fortune and needs to be transported across thousands of kilometers of desert. One of the most impressive curiosities about Australian geography is that establishing basic infrastructure in the north of the country would require investments that would make even wealthy countries think twice before proceeding. To get a real sense of these costs, consider that building a single 100-kilometre paved road in the Australian outback can cost more than $50 million, and that's just to connect 2 points, not counting hospitals, schools, electrical grids, water and sewage systems. Imagine multiplying these costs by hundreds of kilometers of highways, dozens of hospitals, hundreds of schools, and thousands of kilometers of fiber optic cables needed to connect a modern city to the world. Geographical curiosities show us that sometimes the most ambitious dreams run into the most basic reality, budget mathematics. What makes these costs even more astronomical is that everything needs to be designed to withstand extreme conditions that would test even the world's most advanced engineering. Roads that last 20 years in temperate climates can deteriorate in just 5 years under the scorching sun and torrential rains of the tropical north. Imagine electrical cables that need to withstand 200 km/h winds during cyclones, or water systems that must function perfectly both at 50 degrees Celsius temperatures and during sudden floods. Orcon, a specialist in Australian infrastructure, estimates that construction costs in the tropical north can be up to 300% higher than temperate regions, due to the need for special materials, specialized labor, and redundant safety systems. It's like trying to build a normal house, but discovering you need bunker foundations, fortress walls, and a space laboratory roof. The curiosities about extreme engineering reveal that nature always charges a premium price for its most challenging conditions. But here's a perspective that can completely transform our understanding of these seemingly prohibitive costs. The same challenges that make Northern Australian infrastructure so expensive also make it a unique laboratory for developing technologies that the entire world will need in the coming decades. With climate change intensifying extreme events globally, solutions developed for Northern Australia, like resilient energy systems, architecture adapted to extreme heat, and water conservation technologies, can become extremely valuable export products. Companies like Cyro are already developing construction materials that become more resistant with heat, solar energy systems that function efficiently even at high temperatures, and desalination technologies powered by renewable energy. Geographical curiosities teach us that the most expensive problems to solve today can become the most profitable solutions to sell tomorrow. And this leads us to a final reflection: do all these obstacles really prevent development, or do they simply show us that perhaps Australia has found the perfect formula by concentrating its development where it makes the most sense? Now that you've discovered the true secrets behind Australian geography, answer me: just as Australia concentrated its resources where they would yield the best results, are you focusing your energies in the right places in your life? Or are you wasting time trying to develop the north of your own existence, investing in areas that simply don't have conditions to prosper? Geography teaches us that wisdom lies in recognizing limitations and working with them, not against them. If these geographical curiosities awakened your thirst for knowledge, leave your like, share this video with someone who needs to see this, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Because once you start seeing the world through geography's eyes, every landscape tells a story that can transform your life.